G'day there guys, it's your Aussie hubby Marky, back at it again with another episode of r/malicious compliance. Now, if you love me as much as I love you, you'll head on down to that like button and smash the hell out of it. Now with that out of the way, I'd love for you to sit back, relax, chuck a prawn on the barbie, and get ready for some good content. Now our first story today comes from user Heterochromia Cat, titled, Military Spouse Accuses Me of Cheating on My Husband with My Husband. I've been living in Japan for a little over 2 years with my husband. He was born here, and we decided to move to his hometown. It's a small city, but there's enough to do without getting bored. I'd describe us as an AMWF couple, Asian man, white female for those who don't know. It's not so common in Western countries, and it can feel like we are some rare shiny Pokemon as Asian man, white female in rural Japan. Lots of staring, occasional secret picture, or even small chats if an old lady is brave enough to approach us. It can feel uncomfortable eating at restaurants, because kids will turn around in their seat and stare at us the whole time with an open fish mouth. Coincidentally, there's a small US military base located in his city. The closer you are to downtown, the more American families you see. I'm constantly mistaken for being military by Americans and Japanese, which is understandable. Besides myself, I know only 5 other interracial marriages here. It's always locals who ask about my American husband when I'm out alone, which I respond in Japanese, Watashi wa no oto wa Nihonjin desu, koko ni sunde masu. My husband is Japanese and I live here. Or something along those lines. Americans never ask about my marriage as they assume my spouse is American. When we are together in public, we do abnormal couples behavior, such as holding hands. No, couples rarely hold hands in public, let alone say I love you. We don't go downtown too often, since it's all pay to park, and it's a nightmare to find a place. It was a beautiful warm day for the first time in months, but we decided to battle for a spot and walk around the shops. The crowd was heavy since the weather was great and winter was ending. The season for new American families to move here just finished, so I'm sure there was many people's first times to leisurely walk and shop outside. We find a parking spot and made our way to the outside shops. Of course, we are holding hands and casually talking and laughing. Wow! I hear from this American woman about 10 feet behind us. You know that a Japanese stereotype against Americans is that we are rudely and obnoxiously loud. And this wow was loud enough for me to turn my head around at that noise. She was with 2 other mums who had like 3 kids each. They were staring at me, but perhaps we just accidentally had eye contact at the right time. Seriously, another little homewrecker is doing this in public? Chill, woman. You're so loud even I can hear you. We find a table nearby at the Starbucks outside. We are enjoying our drinks when the same group of women approached us with their strollers in tow. They definitely had some sort of purpose with something to say to us. Let's call her Onna, the woman in Japanese. Onna is like, excuse me, but you need to keep whatever you're doing in your messed up home. Doing that in public in front of families to see is disgusting and immoral. My kids don't need such a bad display of marriage. I'm so confused. As was my husband who can speak English. Who knew drinking coffee outside was a crime against humanity and marriage and anime? I'm sorry, what did we do? You know exactly what you're doing. She points to the wedding ring. No, I don't. Good lord, does your husband know about this? Is he on a ship right now? That's so like a dependopotamus. Her friend laughs. In case you don't speak military, a dependopotamus is slang for a military wife who stays at home all day, doesn't clean, uses their spouse as an ATM, and looks like Jabba the Hutt. It dawns on me. She thinks I'm a military spouse, and I'm cheating on my American husband. I started laughing because she's suggesting I'm cheating on my husband with my husband. So I say to her, this is my spouse. I'm actually not part of the military community and have a Japanese visa. Onna looks at my significant other up and down. The 2 women behind her apologize, but the Onna didn't believe it. She says, "No one would voluntarily want to live in this little town." Nice lie. But you're not representing the military community. You make all of us wives look like tramps. Who is your husband and what is his rank? Also, I need to see your dependent ID. My husband is a high rank, so he'll make sure your husband is aware of your infidelity. She pulls out her phone to probably type my response. I'm offended since this is actually a nice place to live and very open to foreigners. I say, look, my husband's name is Ray. Not his real name, I don't want to reveal personal information. And he's sitting right here. Look, I'm not going to show you my military ID, since I don't have one and you're not the police. As proof, you can obviously see our wedding bands match, and here's a picture. I show her my phone screen, which is us in traditional Japanese clothes on our wedding day. Her eyes became huge at the picture. Her two friends and their spawn have already started walking away. Why are you in a relationship with him? You should be in a normal relationship and start having a family with American kids. She says some other statements, which I'd consider racist against the Asian race. It's so ironic because we are in Japan, and she's fussing about me being married to a Japanese man. My husband has been quiet throughout the whole exchange, and says to me we should go. I agreed and stood up. I say, stop! The things you were saying are extremely offensive. I was a part of the military community myself some years ago, and what you're doing is against spousal conduct. She just smirked and says, go ahead and tell people what I did then. My high-ranking husband is an E7, and everything will be swept under the rug no matter what happens. You can't touch me. So, that's what I did. Note, this is a small military community. Someone does something minor, and it's talked about between wives like chickens. Later that day, I run into my friend who works on the base, and she's well known in the community for being one of the main event coordinators. I don't miss the chance to comply with Honor's demand, and explain to my friend about the exchange and how it made my husband extremely uncomfortable with her remarks. She asked me if this person looked like and so, which I said yes. My friend rolls her eyes. She says she just arrived a couple months ago and is already causing problems with rumors and drama. Looks like we have a racist too. I'll make sure what she said is passed on. It's been a half a year later and I didn't hear anything about Honor again, since I distanced myself from making military friends here. I've only been in my new city for a little over 2 years, and experienced more drama from my military families than I have my whole high school career. That is, until now. Last week, I ran into my friend who's getting ready to leave back to the United States. We had a little discussion about her moving and my family planning, and dropped a bombshell. Friend says, "Do you remember Honor, who accused you of cheating on your non-existent military spouse and calls your husband a racist name?" Of course. I haven't heard anything from her since. Well, I mentioned we were already having problems with her not long after she got here. I told my boss that there's a person who was bothering and threatening civilians and asking for IDs, which isn't allowed for someone with her status. My boss was extremely interested after I mentioned her name, because Honor was scheduled for an interview in my department. I suggested we look at her social media accounts from her past behavior, because we don't tolerate racism. It was easy to find her Twitter and Facebook, particularly Facebook, since we have many mutual friends. Her SNS was shocking. While she set her Facebook to private, her Twitter was littered with malicious tweets and retweets. This included racism slang from many nationalities, colourful language, and using her husband's military rank to bully others. She made it very clear that she wants to see her current city burn to the ground, and why would anyone want to learn Japanese since it sounds terrible? We printed some of the more extreme things she posted, and we still invited her to the interview. Oh, and did I mention my boss is Japanese? So she comes into the interview, which I was a part of. I asked 3 good things about her, which she says is dependent, gets things done, and friendly. My boss just looked at her for a second, before he pulled out her tweets and asked her to explain how she can be friendly and serve the local community if she hates it so much. Honor was floored, and said someone hacked into her account, despite there being at least 3 years of slanderous tweets. We thanked her for coming and said, "We can't accept an employee with this conduct." As far as I know, she's still not working because some spouses found her Twitter not long after the interview and was shared in all departments. No one will touch her application now. So I said, "So all of this was discovered because I told you about her accusations?" "Yes." "Oh, and she's kind of an outcast socially right now because she cheated on her husband a couple months ago." And there you have it, folks. Because one person couldn't mind their own business, they lost a potential job and had their social media exposed. Super ironic, since she became the dependipotamus and adulterer, the same thing she was accusing me of. Edit. Since some posts say it's fake because my writing sucks, this is how I tell my stories online. And I've got to disagree with those people. This story was written amazingly well. I actually really liked it. It's always funny how the people who accuse others of misconduct the loudest are usually the ones engaging in said misconduct themselves. Lots of being nice to your face and then talking behind your back too, by the older women. I'll stick to my best friend here, who is an old Japanese woman and gives me lots of snacks. E7 isn't really that high a rank. Even the spouse of an E7 would know that. Like, congrats, your husband is a platoon sergeant. I agree, definitely not high enough to be throwing it around. Most couples in my city are freshly married and still in college. Saying E7 probably has the E3s shaking in their boots. Right? I mean, honestly, the odds of her saying that to you, and it turns out that your spouse outranks hers, are pretty danged high. What's she gonna do the first time she confronts someone like that and it turns out she's a captain's wife? I genuinely feel a little bad for her husband. He's probably gotten his butt reamed over her behavior. And military wives are entitled sea bags for the most part. Like when they ask for a military spouse discount. Champ, you're just the wife. You did not risk your life for others. I lasted as a military wife for 1 year, and it was the worst time of my life. I didn't have kids, so that automatically excluded me from anything with the other wives. Revolved their coffee meetups and body oil parties around their kids. Oh, that's gross. You guys got any creepy military wife stories to share? I'd love to hear them after that, God. And now on to our next story, posted by user Stuff Things and Stuff, titled, "Security made us show the last 5 photos on our phone. My coworker, and absolute hero, maliciously complied at a security on one of our subcontractor jobs. The customer was a manufacturer for high-end electronic components. Security was tight, as a small 4-inch by 6-inch box could contain $250,000 worth of microchips. Our team was installing equipment in their facility for 1 week. A security checkpoint had to be passed every trip in or out of the building. Mr. Security Guard, Chad maybe, decided my coworker Steve probably was more suspicious than the other 4 techs. So every trip in or out, not only was Steve made to dump his entire contents of his backpack out onto the table and go through it, Chad required Steve to show him the last 5 pictures taken on his phone to prove that he wasn't stealing secrets. This is all fine, except Chad let everyone else through without any sort of inspection. Steve is trying to stay positive, but obviously this is eating away at him. Steve tries to be overly positive and also a bit snarky with comments like, "Thank you, Paul Blart, for keeping America safe," which busts up the rest of our crew. Then, Steve has the idea that we'll free him for the rest of the week. Wednesday comes along. Steve is overly scrutinized on our way in as usual. As we head to the security at lunch, Steve says he has to go to the bathroom. He comes back out a few minutes later, absolutely giddy. Chad Blart, mall cop, stops us on our way out and asks Steve to see his camera roll. Steve gladly hands the phone over. Chad is greeted by some very peculiarly angled shots of Steve's butthole. "What the fuck?" Chad throws the phone down on the table. "Oh, sorry, I thought I had a hemorrhoid and wanted to see how bad it was. Is everything okay with my pictures? Is the facility safe?" Chad never checked Steve's materials again. Good on you, Steve. A good security guard also checks the back door. Fun fact, Steve was actually showing Chad where the microchips were hidden. Yuck! And that's how Steve hacked security and got the secrets out. Nicely done. This is stupid too. The guard always checks the same number of pictures. So take 6 selfies after you take the pictures, or just move them into another folder, or email them to yourself and delete them. It's almost like the security measures are completely useless. Who would have thought? That's insane. I was expecting a pee-pee picture. The brown eye wonder was a twist. That all-seeing eye of Sphincteron, the chocolate starfish, the cinnamon rose, the butthole sun. Oh, again, the list goes on and on, doesn't it? And our next story was posted by user Argash, titled, "If you need to pee more than twice a day, you need a doctor's note." Okay, sure. Cleaning out my home office today and stumbled across paperwork I had saved for whatever reason from a crappy call center job I worked at 15 years ago. This was an outbound sales thing, and it was non-stop calls all day. Needless to say, the job sucked. With the constant talking, your voice would start cracking throughout the day if you didn't hydrate. So I would bring jugs of water to sip on all day long. This of course meant frequent trips to the restroom. I never abused these trips, and they were always 3 minutes or less. But of course, this wasn't good enough for management. Oh no no no. One day, my manager demanded I get a doctor's note if I wanted to pee at any time other than one of my 2 regularly scheduled breaks. I could tell she was convinced I would not do it. I scheduled the appointment and filled the doctor in, who thought it was hilarious that this manager either 1, didn't understand biology, or 2, was on a huge power trip. He provided me with the most condescending doctor's note ever. To whom it may concern, this letter concerns my patient blank. Blank requires a lot of fluid intake while talking on the phone in order to avoid drying out and becoming hoarse. When he drinks this much fluid, he must urinate every 60 to 90 minutes. Please excuse these brief visits to the bathroom as they are unavoidable. Needless to say, she was not happy. My co-workers though all made the same trips to the same doctor and got similar notes. Pretty sure I wore a crap-eating grin every time I went to the bathroom after that. Imagining that doctor, I'm getting paid to write notes so people can pee when they need to. I'm so glad I went to medical school, lol. Based on the GPs that I know, they don't give a freak. Hell, they would probably go overboard with the notes and giving their patients extra concessions if their patient explains why they need a note from the doctor and the doctor thinks it's bullcrap. I went for my annual physical and I said I needed a doctor's note because it was the day after a holiday weekend, and my employer can get critical about that, so my doctor wrote me out of work for 2 days. Hey, nice guy doctor. He's the hero we need. Oh yeah boss, sorry, turns out my doctor says I also need a 30-minute break every 2 hours as well to rest my hands and eyes from strain. Thanks for telling me to go visit him. Oh, and medical conditions are protected under the ADA, so now that everyone has a paper trail, you can't discipline me for this either. It's a good idea. And Bella Corliss says, I had a call center supervisor give me grief for using the bathroom so often during a certain time of the month. This supervisor would show up to work frequently hungover and take naps in his office chair. I tried to be discreet about it, but he wasn't having it. So I got fed up and loudly said, I'm having my period and it's a heavy flow day. He bolted to his office and slammed the door shut, while all of my female co-workers laughed their heads off because he was doing the same thing to them, but they had been too afraid to say anything. Yikes, the man got what he deserved, didn't he? And our next story was posted by Sumo Ninja 17, titled, New hire misses most of the first 3 weeks of work. then uses me as a reference. Let's call her Karen, just because it fits. She came in and applied for a job. When I looked at her resumes and application, I realized she knew some of my old neighborhood friends and schoolmates. She interviewed well, so I gave her a job. Told her to be in at Monday 9 a.m. Monday morning, she's not in. She no calls, no shows. Tuesday, no call, no show. I had now written her off. Wednesday, she shows up about noon. Claims she was in her basement Sunday night, and her brother was working out, and he accidentally knocked her out during his intense workout. She claimed her doctor told her that she had a concussion and she should stay home for a couple of days. She had no doctor's note, no mark on her head, but thinking her story was so off the wall it could almost be true, I let her come to work the next day. She worked Thursday and Friday. We paid at the end of every week, and I gave her a check Friday. I also did not deduct the days she missed. She came to me and asked about my full paycheck. I told her we were a family business and realized people had lives outside work. He tried to make sure people knew they were appreciated and tried to take care of our people. She teared up and thanked me and said we could count on her. She worked the full next week. Did okay. She seemed to fit in. Seemed. The third week, she showed up Monday, but Tuesday was another no-show, no-call. We did not hear from her for over 2 weeks. When she finally showed up, her story was the stuff of legends. She claimed her husband had forged divorce papers a couple years previous. Thinking she was divorced, she moved back into her parents' house. She claimed her ex-husband was at her parents' house when she got home the last night she worked. He told her he made up the divorce and the paperwork was phony, so they were still married, and he wanted to get back together. She claims she refused and he kidnapped her. She said it took her until a couple days ago to get away from him. She wanted to come into work the next day. She did not call the police and he wasn't arrested. There was nothing in the papers or on the news about any of this. She was not hurt, thank God. And she then asked if I believed her. I did not, but told her that I really needed someone I could count on coming in reliably every day. I gave her a paycheck for 1 week. She had worked 1 day and told her I wished her good luck. I had already replaced her and her replacement was one of the best employees we ever had. Here is the malicious compliance. The next month, I come into a phone message that someone from XXX company called for a reference for Karen. Well, I didn't know the porn industry was going well, but as my secretary is handing me the message, she's laughing at the look on my face. I asked if she was kidding. She said she was not. She said she got a call from a man saying he was the owner of a company in the area, and he asked about Karen. Then, my secretary asked if she could listen in on the call. She was a pistol. She then goes and gets my partner and tells him I'm going to call and give Karen a reference. Now he is in my office laughing too. I call the guy and we make some small talk. I tell him what we do and he tells me what he wants Karen to do for him. I tactfully avoided answering any of his questions about Karen directly. I think he was beginning to suspect something. Remember folks, employers can get in a lot of trouble for bad references. He finally asked my opinion of Karen, and what I said was, if you can get Karen to work for you, you will be very lucky. He heard what I said and how I said it. He repeated that back to me exactly as I said it. All my words were the right ones. It was my tone and intonation that got my point across. He thanked me and hung up. Karen comes into the office a couple days later. She looks mad, but is trying to be pleasant. She told me she is having trouble finding a job, and mentioned she has used me as a reference. She wanted to know if anyone from XXX company has called me. She knew they did. She told me she really wants the job at 3X company. I told her I had been called, and I told the guy that he'd be lucky to get her to work for him. My secretary confirmed that's what I told him. She told him she was right next to me during the whole conversation. Karen smiled and thanked me and headed to the door. She said she wondered why she was having so much trouble getting a job. She asked if she could continue to use me as a reference, and I told her absolutely. I'd also told her that I'd tell everyone the same thing, that any employer would be lucky if they can get you to work for them. She then walked away, smiling, happy, and clueless. We had someone at my old company who got undressed in the parking lot at 12 PM to 1 PM and then left with no notice and tried to come back that following Monday. Keep in mind, he tried to show up 4 days later like nothing happened, and that he didn't just leave randomly during the middle of the day. He then had the nerve to leave a negative review saying company was so lost and he was fired wrongly. Tries to sue, but doesn't even show up in court. Weird thing was that he looked like the classic middle-aged white man with a picture-perfect family in the photo on his desk. We still talk about 4 years later. We supplied 18 employees with cell phones. One of our longest employees disappeared for 2 weeks, came in, and confessed he went on a bender, stayed drunk for 2 weeks. I worked with him once. The second time he did it, I let him go. He had gotten rid of his personal cell phone and home phone number. When he gave me back his company's cell phone, he basically handed me his life. I didn't find out for a couple weeks. I called Prince and gave them permission to talk to him about his number only. I sent him the phone along with a message he could call Prince and get his phone put in his name and keep the same number. He did that. Falls under guys you hate to fire, but they leave you no choice. Oh man, that's sad. I hope that guy gets help. That does not sound like a good situation. I have said, when asked as a reference about someone, I don't feel comfortable with this line of questions. Yep, that got the point across. The person we were talking about was as useful as a window in a submarine. Well, I told a background checking agency once that Mama told me if I can't find something nice about someone, I shouldn't say anything at all. She lost her decorum. I also did not say another word. And what an exciting life Karen had. Concussion? Kidnap? All in her imagination. And what a cheek she had asking for a reference. She got the reference you get when you're not really getting a reference, which is just what she deserved. FYI, I am leaving a ton of info out about what I found out about her. Remember, she was known to many people I knew. She was colourful, to say the least. Once I fired a girl for stealing $1,000 out of the register and only returning $300. She then tried to claim unemployment from us, and my boss had a great laugh at that. Yes, I have also been told we cannot tell another employer that they stole, unless we actually filed criminal charges. Lawyers suck. Alright guys, that's all I have for you today. Tell me what you thought about this one down in the comments. I actually really enjoy these subs like r/pro revenge and malicious compliance. Usually these top stories are just so well written. It's like a joy to read out. Anyway, I love your faces. I'll see you in the next episode. It might be a Philip DeFranco saying, but who cares? I hope you had a good day, night sleep, whatever you're up to, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.